Hi, shalom everyone. Let me state the obvious, and that is, we need one another. We need one another not only for companionship. We actually need one another to validate our existence. There's only one truth that does not need something to validate it, and that is God. So whether or not we accept God or not, whether or not He creates this world or He decides to destroy this world, nothing of God's creation will add to His truthfulness. And in the words of Maimonides, everything needs God. God needs nothing. He is, He was, He will be. That is truth. But we're not talking philosophy, so let's just talk about me and you. What does that mean, we need one another? Well, why don't we just start with, you've all heard, if a tree falls in the forest, but there's no one to hear the noise, so did it make noise? In other words, if there's no one to acknowledge that noise happened, so maybe nothing happened. Let's take an extreme example. If there would be perhaps a child abandoned on an island, 1 year old, and essentially is adapted by the animals, grows up amongst the animals, would it know that it's a human? Or would it consider itself an unusual animal? Maybe smarter, inferior in strength, it cannot run as fast or fly. On the other hand, it has its own cunning. When will this creature know that it's human? When it sees another human, and when another human acknowledges this savage, unusual creature as a human. One of the most beautiful fairy tales is the ugly duckling, right? About the swan that grew up amongst ducks and felt it was the ugliest duck because it didn't look the same. And yet, one day, it realizes it's not a duck, it's actually a swan, and its beauty is outstanding. The slender neck and the beautiful white plumage and so on and so forth. How do you know you're intelligent? King Solomon said, every fool thinks he's intelligent. So if a fool never said anything, the fool is convinced that he is or she is very intelligent until someone tells him you're an idiot. And if there are many people that say that, then the person has to acknowledge, I guess I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And we could go on and on. In fact, one of the most valuable parts of having a good friend, or at times therapy, is someone validating what you're feeling. You're wondering, am I normal? Should I be feeling this? Why am I feeling this? Maybe I'm hypersensitive. Maybe I'm crazy. And then a good friend or a therapist or something along those lines listens to you and says, you know what? I understand what you're saying. You have every right to feel this. And then suddenly that in itself becomes something that I guess adds to you. I'll tell you the truth, even sickness, no one knows our body like ourselves. But if we go to a doctor, and a second doctor, and a third doctor, and they run all the tests, they say there's nothing wrong with you, then we're sort of told, it's all in your mind. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. And you're upset about this because you don't feel well. But then you're saying, can they all be wrong? Until you go to a specialist who tells you, no, you're suffering from this rare disease, and instead of making you sad, it makes you happy. You see, I'm not crazy. Okay, what's my point? The point is that we have to appreciate one another, not only for the other person, but actually it brings to our own humanity, and it brings us to the level of completeness. If we extend this idea, the more you could get someone else to become your concern, someone else's identity, is used almost to strengthen your identity, the greater you will become. I know I didn't say it well, so let me tell two very short stories and of heroes that are happening today, and I'll let you continue with the thought on your own. Thought number one. We all know that in Gaza, the Israeli army is fighting, but it's fighting a war which is really unthinkable, because there's an enemy that does not identify itself. It's an enemy that hides amongst civilians, amongst innocents, and in houses, and so on. So this actually happened. So there's a small group of soldiers, and they have to go into a home, a house in Gaza. Which one is the most dangerous part? What is the most dangerous part? The first person. You go into the house, you don't know if it's booby-trapped, you don't know if there's someone hiding, you don't know anything. So it takes a fair amount of courage and bravery to actually go into that house. Everyone else will cover you, but you're the guinea pig. So the story is told that the captain says, we need someone, and he turns to a fellow, we'll call him Shimon. Shimon, you go first. And Shimon prepares himself into what might be a suicide mission, and suddenly Yankel jumps up. Shimon, no, stop, I want to go first. Captain says, well, 1 second, why are you more suitable for this than Shimon? He said, well, Shimon is married and he has 2 children. If he dies, he's going to leave over a widow and orphans, and their pain will be indescribable. I'm single, and if I die, I die. So Shimon, you stay over here, I'm going. And then Shimon looks at Yankel and says, Yankel, are you crazy? I'm going. Because I at least will leave a legacy. People will remember me, but you're only 20 years old. If God forbid you get killed, what will be the remainder of you? Who will remember you? What kind of an imprint will you leave on this earth? I want to go. And actually the captain who told over the story and all was just amazing. Each person, there was no death wish over here, but there was a deep, deep appreciation of another person's value. And indeed, I don't know what they resolved, who went in, whether it be Shimon or Yaakov, but the fact that Shimon acknowledged Yaakov's predicament or condition, and Yaakov acknowledged Shimon, made them much greater than who they have been on their own. A similar story, but I don't know the name, but in the early hostage deal, one of the women that came out mentioned what gave her strength was the fact that she was together with a young girl. The first 72 hours or so, there was just so much happening and so much barbarism and so much humiliation and fright and hurt, physical hurt. It was almost impossible to process anything. But after a couple of days, they realized that they're hostages, and now, in the hands of barbarians, what are their chances? And everyone knows how important it is to keep up your spirits. So this girl said, I was losing it big time. But I was in a room where there was a 16-year-old girl who was terrified. And I, being the older of the two, realized that I had a mission to save this young girl's sanity. So being the older one, so to speak, the more mature, I tried to encourage her. I tried to give her insights in how to look at their captors. At times we even laughed. And she said, as horrible as it was, I somehow felt I was fulfilling something. Not that I lost everything. I actually gained something. What I gained was the opportunity to be of benefit to another. One can only speculate. If she would have been alone, she would have lost it as well, because they treated her less than human. But when a human is able to do something for a fellow human, the one that's doing it becomes actually greater. My friends, all of us have our own personal issues that we're dealing with. You want to be great, or do you want to be validated? Why don't you try doing that for someone else? Help someone else. Open your heart for someone else's needs. And when that will happen, you will actually feel that you as a human being have been not only validated, but you as a human being have touched godliness and become a godly being. Shalom.